Hi, and welcome to The Building People, the show where we spotlight the career journeys and hard-won lessons of the people keeping Britain's buildings running. I'm Paul McCorkadale, I'm CEO of Grid Edge, and today I'm delighted to have Atiya Khan, Associate Director of Global Sustainability at Macro, the facility management company operating across 45 countries and managing over 600 buildings for lots of clients that is well known. Tia spent 20 years proving that sustainability isn't a policy document that you stick in a drawer. It's systems, it's processes, and it's people who know how to make buildings actually perform. She's the person who walked into Carillion's construction sites, Mighty's hard services division, and ISS FM operations with nothing more than a policy statement and walking out having embedded ISO 14001, won industry awards, and built teams of specialist consultants. At an early age, Attiya was losing sleep over pandas and deforestation. 2 decades later, she's a sustainability leader that an FM companies headhunt when they're trying to stop talking about net zero and start building their decarbonisation pathways, circular economy strategies, and asset management programs that actually deliver. Attiya, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, it's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation and the introduction as well. I was like, oh, that's me.
Yeah, I always love that first part, just looking back and trying to summarize it because I'm sure as we go through this, it's all those bits of this journey that you've been on that often you just forget and you move on to the next thing. And I suppose that gets us started, Atia, is that you've spent 2 decades at the intersection of environmental science, law, and global FM. All sound like completely opposite ends of spectrums around should they really come together to make things happen? I mean, from your early days at university and now being associate director at Macro, I mean, give us the fast forward version of how did you get to where you are as a global leader in sustainability?
Wow. Um, I think one of the things is I absolutely love working in sustainability. Like it really is my passion. So I think, Paul, it's just been a case of uh, finding organizations, like being part of organizations that have wanted to support me on these journeys and have had that interest and that drive around sustainability, and that's really allowed for me to grow and build my skill sets as well, like within different organizations. And every organization I've worked in, I'd say that it's been a very different mix and so different exposures. But a lot of sustainability is like transferable skills. Um, from my time at university, um, I think that's a stage when a person learns about, what their potential strengths are and the things that get you out of bed in the morning. And, I've always had this, real passion and interest in like research and, what's happening around the environment. I was uh, very like moved by environmental issues, like as a young child. And I think university for me was a really exciting time because I felt like, oh, I'm actually learning about something that can influence the planet, like going forward. So I think at that stage I picked up on the fact that my skills were probably more in report writing and presenting, which was interesting because I never liked public speaking as a young child. I was probably
Yeah.
like quite shy, but loud when I was in a crowd, maybe. So it's I think like from the university like perspective for me, it was like learning about what skills I had that would be which are my growth areas or the tick in the boxes that I had. And I think that that's a skill that stays with you. From a sustainability perspective, we're constantly trying to tell a story with data, with information, and I think that that's something that I probably pulled upon from my university days. And then yeah, working through different organizations, it was just a case of I think a lot of it's around timing, right place at the right time, having those opportunities to work on some really exciting like projects, hospital bids and developments, opportunities to work on sustainability and environmental programs within the private and in the public sector. I think it's just a case of I was in the right place at the right time. Um, but yeah, a case of having the right skills as well to be able to support a business at that period as well. So
Yeah, because you've got you say there, a lot of it was that initial starting of researching and then influencing. And then, I mean, I suppose where you're at now is yes the research and yes the data, but more importantly is what can be done and what are those steps to actually to make something happen. And that's quite a transition because it's like I was saying earlier, is those different parts around how you look at sustainability. It's got loads of elements to it, but ultimately it's how do they come together and actually make a difference? How is it going to make a change? And that kind of looks like where you've kind of been in your career. And probably, I suppose my question is, do all of those elements still play a part in that from where you are now, or is there certain things that now take more priority in your time than maybe did do a few years back? That's now the thing that you have to do more of than you did maybe a couple of years back.
Yeah, no, that's a really good angle as well. I think, yeah, definitely. I think see the sustainability agendas and things have changed over time, and it's the last 10 years I would say have been like really exciting, because we've had more need for disclosure, and so there's been more of a drive around sustainability and reporting, finding ways that we can support our clients and our corporate organization to collect data, be it around energy performance or waste or biodiversity. Like, how do we collect information on that, and finding ways around that, finding ways to collect information on climate change risks, for example. So I think that's been a change in the industry, and it's been actually really exciting to be able to pull on data that hadn't existed previously. I think prior, probably about 15 years ago, 20 years ago even, the big pulls were around ISO 14001 and environmental management systems. And so that was more, I feel, more outcomes-based information. You go to site, you do an environmental risk assessment, you do an environmental aspects and impacts register, you create a list of priorities and little actions that you need to do, or big actions you need to do in order to mitigate environmental risk on site. So I would say, yeah, at that point, it was probably more based upon risks and more outcomes-based, more audit-based information. So looking at kind of like secondary types of data. Whereas now with the changes in disclosures, etc., and access to more information, I think that we are pulling on more primary data, and we're probably looking into more modeling as well within the sustainability space. So I think that's been a distinct change, I would say, especially in my career in terms of the reports that we're producing now. We're tending to try to find more information on environment, and it's exciting because there are public databases available now that weren't around, 10, 15 years ago. So yeah.
That's yeah, I mean that, and a lot of time data doesn't always give you the answer, but at least gives you the visibility of the steer and the information to make a decision or try and make a decision. It's sometimes the case. The interesting thing, I mean, from your career and even what you do now, I mean, you've spent many years lecturing at Kingston and teaching the next generation. How's that? How's teaching them maybe changed the way you approach your day job in a corporate world? That's it's like two sides of a completely opposite sides of a coin, isn't it? Really, but I'm curious to does it change your approach?
Um, I think it's the other way around, Paul. The reason I fell into this specifically is because a lot of sustainability and environment is training, it's engaging people, it's speaking to people, it's bringing them on that journey. And a lot of this information, I would say, like historically, like within my career, I would say maybe 15 odd years ago, there wasn't that much e-learning available on sustainability topics and
Yeah.
things that people could access. You would spend a lot of time like researching new ideas, like what is the circular economy? Quick, we're going to have to write a briefing on this, on the circular economy opportunities within our business, but also the impact in our business, and give some people some ideas around building management of what the potential recommendations could be. Like we could work with a client to introduce circular economy and mitigate that risk. So I think the lecturing came about because, and in fact, a lot of the content that we helped the university build was actually based on material that we had, like I'd already been delivering within the business I was in at the time. And so it was quite an easy transition. And I ended up working with the university, and also one of my other colleagues as well, to rewrite the whole environmental management module for them
Okay.
and
Wow.
create it more aligned to industry.
Yeah.
So what I really wanted, like being an ex-student from there as well, I just felt when I left university, we were like pushed out into the open and walking into like these job interviews and meeting corporate organizations, and the language was completely different. And I
Yeah,
remember being sat in an interview once, and the interviewer was looking at my CV saying, "Oh, it's very interesting. So you know how to do resource use mapping um, and you also looking into like climate change impact. That's great. We need someone just to manage ISO 14001." So they couldn't really understand how those two elements could be transferable skills within the workplace. So yeah, my passion in that space was to make sure that the students finish the masters and actually speak the right language when they're
mm,
walking into job opportunities, etc. And they're aligned more with industry. So yeah, I'm really proud of the work that myself and my other colleague completed, like with the university, in that sense. But it wasn't a case of I ended up working with the university and the lecturing was helping the other way. I would say it was completely, this was around industry supporting the university
yeah,
to make environmental management more relevant to organizations and business.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting because I suppose on the face of it, when you look at it just that it's something you're doing, and you don't quite do the connection, but the way you described it there, actually a large part of all the work is education, whether it's in the university or whether it's with a corporate that you're trying to bring up to speed with what the need is and why you deal with this. So there is quite when you described it there, you can understand now there's quite a lot of crossover that can benefit both industry and education. So that's really interesting. And I mean you've been in the world of real estate and FMs for a while now. And with your experience, I mean some of the largest FMs providers, what is the big myth about making a building sustainable that most people still believe?
Ah, big myths. Paul, I don't know if there are myths. I feel that our clients are more informed these days. Um, but I do feel there is maybe a dislodge between reality and expectation. So you may be right in that sense, definitely. Um, I think sometimes there's challenges with thinking, oh, net zero and decarbonization is really easy. You just flip a switch and it just happens. But actually understanding the steps and stages and the number of people and subject matter experts that need to be involved in that process is sometimes maybe not understood. So I think that there's probably some gaps in that sense. But a lot of our clients, I would say, do tend to, and I'm probably quite biased because I tend to meet a lot of the clients that already have a sustainability program and strategy in place, or they come to us and say that we need help with X, Y, Z, and then
Yeah,
we're able to support them with our products and services. Um, but I think a lot of them are committed to net zero, whether they understand fully what the business case around that is for their organizations, I think is a separate issue. Um, but I think they also want to do things like the circular economy. I think changes in public disclosures as well. So, push from the EU, the EED as well. That is also pushing organizations to focus on their energy consumption and also make public reporting around that as well. Within the UK, we have like the SECRs, the Streamline Energy and Carbon Reporting. Organizations, a lot more organizations have to report into that system now in their carbon accounting, and also put in information on what they're doing to um, mitigate or reduce their footprint. Specifically, things they've done around energy management as well is included in that report. So I feel like clients that we've definitely come across and are working with, they want to do the right thing in most situations. Whether they have a full pathway put together is secondary, but that's where organizations like ourselves are able to support them, being their FM partners and working within their building management. Um, so yeah, I don't think there's a massive dislodge there, but sometimes I would agree that it can be a shock when we actually go back and do a full business case on the cost of decarbonisation. And yeah, there is. There are probably several examples, Paul, that I could probably delve into in a bit of detail. But things around, clients may come to us and say, "Oh, we don't need to worry about energy optimization because we've got a BMS in place." And that's great. It's a BMS, but what is it set? What are the set points within that BMS? Is it aligned to your building utilization? Are all your assets as part of the BMS? Are they integrated into the system? And is it actually giving you a full picture? So I would say in the last few months it has been interesting because we have undertaken like a few energy optimization surveys with a specific client, for example, and they were under the impression that they've got BMS systems in place and therefore they've got accurate energy data. And we've been able to pick out through our energy optimization and building surveys on energy performance that actually there's quite a few questions. So that's something that the team kind of delve into. It's all around your relationship, I would say, with your client in that space as well.
Yeah.
They need to be able to trust you to tell them the truth
Yeah.
where the gaps are.
Honest, honesty, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. You see that a lot, don't you? And that bit you say on and not just BMS, but tools or systems that people have in place, and they often, I'm going to use the word assumptions, isn't it? I mean, often you assume, especially if you're new in a business, that the people before you'd set all these things up or had them running really well, and they might have had, but there might have been somebody else who came in and then made another change, which is contradicting previous changes of how the system was run, and they're not maybe getting the right data or whatever. And I think that's, that bit you touched on, I always think kind of like that assumption bit. Assume that the thing does what it does and that it's just running. And then you lift the lid a little bit and everybody starts going, oh dear, like we'll just put the lid back down. But you work with lots of organisations that have got massive scale from an operations point of view. You started to touch on it there, but is there a hard-won lesson that stands out around the reality of implementing sustainability? Because you touched on it that often people know roughly what they're trying to do, but the reality of what you have to do, what it's going to cost in resource, etc., is a very different picture to what most people think, especially across large, complex portfolios. And I'm sure it was stuff they didn't teach at university when you get into the
yeah.
reality of how this stuff works. So, is there any ones that stick out for you that you kind of go, oh, I remember that? That was that was really one that was a hard challenge for us.
There's loads of challenges, Paul. um, when it comes to like delivering programs and projects. And this comes down to our skill as a sustainability leads and experts to be able to foresee what these issues are going to be.
Yeah.
So one of the things we always put in when we're putting a proposal, for example, to a client around decarbonisation or a circular economy project, for example, on waste and end disposal and opportunities to improve recycling or reuse, for example, or procurement heat mapping, for example. So when we're looking into those types of proposals, we always say it's dependent upon the data and when we receive information. So that is probably my advice to everybody working in sustainability. always put the caveat on the data. There's a number of reasons around this, because if we don't receive data, for example, there's a delay to us being able to do any analysis and create any kind of report. But then the other element here as well is if there is no data, it's not always a bad news story, because that forms
Okay.
part of a gap analysis. And then what we can then do is look into and work with our client to provide them with some industry averages, so that we're able to produce some sort of understanding of what their potential environmental footprint might be around energy or waste, or whatever it is that we're looking into. But yeah, accurate data, I would say, is one that can really impact on delivery of our projects. So
Mm,
be it a decarbonisation or a circular economy project for a client, if we don't put in that data collection piece and good quality data as well, and if it's not clearly instructed like within our proposals, then yeah, that's a big risk factor, I would say, like working in sustainability. I can give you an example, Paul. I remember there was one project I was working on, and it was for a UK-based insurer, And the program was meant to be 12 weeks, and this was like a couple of years ago. So a 12-week program, and we're doing like an environmental risk assessment, including like biodiversity and climate change risk down to site level. And they didn't have that many sites and locations. So we're looking at this thinking there's less than 20 across the UK. Yeah, we could do this in 12 weeks. No, it became very painful. So even receiving information on what assets were landlord managed versus what was the client managed, even information on that. Square meterage was debated for each of the properties as well. And that project went on for 9 months. I was very
9 months.
proud of the project we produced, but we finished at 9 months. So it was 6 months over the program timing that we'd actually planned for. So yeah, that may be one of the reasons why whenever we produce a proposal, I'm always, the small print is always around data.
Yeah, that's interesting that you end up with a that delay being the fact you can't get the data to do the first step to go to the next step. And I suppose for those watching and listening to this, there's who might be new to the space, but when you talk about data for doing this with buildings, give us a little bit of insight into what are those data sets that you look for? What's the ones that are kind of critical to even just getting going that you would go, well, I need this, and this to just get going? Just to try and help people maybe next time they come along to you and go, I heard what you said on that thing, and I've come back to you, and I've already got these things that might give you a head start. What would those be?
Okay. So from a building management perspective, let's start with the basics. So the basic information is we need an address, which is great, with a full postcode, and a naming convention. So that's to align to, a CAFM system, so computer-aided facility management tool, for example. And what that does, it allows us to then synchronize other data sets together. So be it around asset data or whatever else is available there. So the naming convention for site, the site address with the postcode is great. Information in terms of, is it a landlord managed estate? Is it actually owned by the client? That's really important as well because it helps us to prioritize those locations. So the sites and locations that are 100% owned by a client, for example, they are your priority because that is your scope 1 and 2 footprint. Whereas
Yeah.
if it's landlord managed, it could be within your scope 3 emissions footprinting. And also a lot of the service lines on site, so the management of the environmental risk may not be within the client itself, so it may be with the landlord.
Hmm.
And then the other information that we would like to have as part of that is what potential assets are on site. So we can then overlay from the asset listing. If we have the aligned naming convention, we could find out, for example, if there's gas boilers on site. We could find out the life cycle of those assets as well. So when's the replacement due, etc. And people are probably thinking, what does this have to do with sustainability? But you see, once we're able to overlay the energy performance for sites, so where the client directly pays for a bill or where they indirectly pay through landlord, we're then able to prioritize decarbonisation down to site level by putting in that information. And another good to have when we're looking into decarb is also breakdown and call outs. So any reactive jobs that are going in for a particular location. So that gives us an indication of how assets are performing, and it helps us to prioritize removing those particular assets as well as part of the decarbonisation. So that can form part of our business plan back to a client that we can produce for them around decarb. Other information, water consumption, which we can then, if we have the naming convention, we can overlay with the number of leaks and other things that have been reported as well. And then waste data as well, down to site level, understanding what's managed by landlords versus what's managed by waste contractors, what's the end disposal, the EWC codes of waste collected as well gives us an indication of, can the site segregate waste? How effective are they? Well, are they legally compliant is always a good starting point, isn't it? But then understanding where waste is going. And I'd say waste data, one thing that surprises me, like having worked in sustainability for a while, waste data is still the challenging one in terms of end
Right.
disposal.
Right.
So is it going to landfill? Is it going for energy recovery? Is it going to a MRF and secondary sorted, etc.? Getting that information on that trail around waste can actually take quite a bit of our team's time and
Yeah,
engagement.
yeah, that's that part there that you mentioned. Sorry, just bring to my mind one of our team spent quite a bit. I think when he was in academia, he did quite a bit in that space. And whenever he gets into that conversation, and I don't do a lot in that space personally, so I think I know what it is. And back to this assumption thing, I kind of go, oh well, I know that just goes off here, and that's how it works. And then, as you were just touching on there, he then explains actually all these sequences of things and actually how it flows through, and then you go, oh, right, okay, so that doesn't quite go to where I thought it was going, and it doesn't quite do what I thought it was doing either. So it's interesting that's a part that you kind of highlight because yeah, the space that we are and where we work, but the other part just highlight for the listeners is that bit you were mentioning there about whether you are primary or for a better word secondary in your scope 1, 2 and 3s, because it often gets overlooked and it gets so cloudy because people assume usually the wrong side. They're either thinking it's somebody else's, so it's not their direct, or the other way around, and they're taking on more than they need to take on as well. And that must be pretty common because it's not for most people, unless you're a kind of the area really, the specific subject really well. It's so easy to get it in the wrong line and think that that's your issue or your thing to deal with. So it's in your scope 1, 2s, or it's somebody else's. But you must see that quite a bit.
Yeah, and it's also it depends on the organization as well of how much responsibility they want to take around this
Okay.
space.
Yeah.
Paul, we always refer back to the GHG protocol, and so all the carbon accounting we do is in line with like GHG, and we take the advice from GHG protocol when we're classifying scope 1, 2, and 3. But it can get a bit confusing, or there are some gray areas, and this then comes down to the organization and where they want to set the bar in regards to their carbon accounting. Um, but in terms of like buildings, I would say scope 1 and 2 is where we always say it's where you are directly paying for the utilities. So that's your scope 1 and 2. So your gas consumption and then your electricity or district heating, for example, would be sat within there. Your F gas, for example, would be sat in there as well. So that is your scope 1 and 2. Organization like lease assets or work as part of like co-working spaces, which we're seeing is expanding like a lot. So when we do carbon accounting for organizations, this has like become quite a big thing. And organizations, they maybe forget to ask the question around where is the energy coming from. But we've also come across co-working spaces that have refused to give information on energy performance
Interesting.
to organizations, and it's to do with the contracts. And so there's an element of we need to make sure that we ask the questions before you go out and lease a property or become a member of a co-working space. Will you
Yeah.
have access to some energy data or
Yeah.
waste information, for example, for that location? And that would then sit within your scope 3. But there is something that organizations may put in their scope 1, and that is where they utilize hire vehicles, for example, so what we call like grey fleet, and the fuel consumption associated with that. So some organizations may actually put that in their scope 1 as purchase fuel, whereas others may put it in their scope 3 as a grey fleet footprint. And we're happy either way because both of those systems are compliant as long as there's a plan to get to net zero along that.
When you say grey fleet, what is that? For those that don't know, what does that mean?
So grey fleet is company mileage done not in a fleet vehicle, so a car not controlled by the organization or owned by the organization.
Right. Yeah.
So, for
Interesting.
example, if you go and you hire a vehicle, for
Hmm.
example, a hire
Yeah.
car, and then you put, a couple of £100 of fuel in it and
Yeah.
drive around, that that would sit within grey fleet
Right.
emissions,
Yeah.
but it
Makes
could
sense.
also sit within purchased fuel.
Right. Okay. Yeah. But definitely the word grey there just resounds in my head there of going, yeah, I can just go, it could sit here, it could sit there. And that's where the expertise is so valuable and allowing the people to focus because you could end up doing a million things, but you only need to do 1,000 of them. in all of this. And you've moved from, previously in your career, integration management systems and head of sustainability advisory. But how has the focus evolved? You can see it, you mentioned through the conversation a couple of compliance standards and things like that. And how has that changed the way that we're driving that global strategy and sustainability? Have you seen, you mentioned earlier about, 10, 15 years of what the drivers are coming, but has that made a big difference, do you think?
Yeah, I think public disclosure has definitely pushed. The thing I feel that us within the sustainability industry are a bit sad over the last 2 years because we were expecting the EU to land the CSRD reporting in at the end of 2025 and this year, like 2026. So that's been delayed to 2028 onwards now. So, but I think, yeah. So I think that was really exciting because we were all geared up to deliver on biodiversity. And so biodiversity is something I'm very passionate about. And I feel, it is everyone appreciates that it's important. We all appreciate nature and, the planet. So when we see biodiversity, it makes us feel good. And we know that that's been scientifically proven, etc. Um, but I do feel that from a corporate reporting perspective, it's very much still a question mark. Like, is it important to us or not?
Mm,
Which I feel is pretty sad because it has such a close link to climate change. For me, the whole ambition to get to net zero is to preserve the planet and support biodiversity. So for the movement on the disclosure around biodiversity reporting, for example, I think that that has shifted organizations' minds as well. I mean, the global political situation at this point as well, with some of the large players again coming out of net zero, we have seen shifts as well with large corporates that we work with in terms of what their ambitions are around sustainability or what their disclosures would be in this space. So yeah, I do feel that that is a slight gap, but it's not always bad news, isn't it? Because it will be coming about hopefully in a year's time, and we will see that um, that type of activity pick up again. But yeah, it is interesting, Paul, because we had a conversation with one of our clients a few weeks ago, and they mentioned exactly this, that biodiversity is not a priority for us. But from us on the outside looking in, we know that they're involved in manufacturing, they use raw materials. And so for me, it was very interesting for them to make that statement. But it's to do with the fact that the disclosures push the organizations. And then we also have shareholders and, investor relations also pushing for sustainability disclosure. But yeah, in terms of you were asking about how the industry has changed, I would say it swings and roundabouts, Paul, to be honest, around disclosure. I would say probably about 2000, like here in the UK, I would say around about 2008 to 2010, we had huge push from the government around sustainability, and there was the flexible framework was introduced on sustainable procurement, um,
yeah.
and that was a really exciting piece of work
Mm,
that was issued. And the organization I was working with at the time, we were really proud of the work that we had done to achieve, level one of the framework before our competitors. And it was a very big story, and it was a lot of investment looking back from the organization to go down that sustainable procurement route. And I think that was a really big topic at that
mm,
time. And then it's not been a big topic for the last 15 years, I would
yeah.
say. It's just fallen off the radar. Um, and so, yeah, I think there's been times when some really exciting things have been introduced and picked up by organizations. When the circular economy model was launched, the BS standard 8001, which is now a full ISO standard. I think it's 59001. We'd have to check that number. But when that was first introduced, there was a lot of movement with organizations, and they all wanted to talk about circular economy. And, we were doing loads of proposals and working a lot of solutions workshops around circular economy impacts with organizations, working on procurement heat mapping, like I built a model at the time as well on circular economy, and it's linked to procurement and waste management and how we can tie this all together. But Paul, that didn't last long either. And then organizations then moved on to let's just talk about plastic and single-use plastics. And so it just
Yeah.
became just a fraction of the full circularity thinking.
Yeah.
So it just depends on what the market is doing at the time, and also what public opinion and politics is pushing through.
Yeah.
Um, but I will be honest, I feel now is a bit of a low period, and not like organizations are talking about net zero, but we also have the political landscape saying net zero is not achievable. And so we're fighting against that at this point in time.
Yeah, yeah, the regulations of, there's been loads of regulation development over the last number of years, but and it really does help, that helps to prioritize or bring it up the agenda. Companies got loads to do. I think that's what we've got to accept, companies to run and be successful have got a million and one things to do. And you look at it, you think, well, actually, if those regulations mean that something goes up the line and gets higher up for priority on sustainability, it's great. But that nugget you just said on politics, I think is so important. You've got your regulation, but when you see the political landscape or the world that's around you evolving in a slightly different direction, it near enough creates well, that's probably going to get deprioritized at some point. Even though it's a regulation, because of where it's heading, people start paying less attention because they start to think, well, it's probably not going to matter. I'm probably get away with it because it's not the big thing anymore. So then the importance loses that traction. And that's why it's not, it's a very complex environment that you work in of trying to keep businesses moving in that direction. On that, I suppose how do you get, when all these things are happening, is there a single metric? Is there a common thing that you hear that sort of sets the agenda of how you decide what the best path for each organization is? Do you see commonality, or is every business different in what that thing here is that makes them make decisions for this point?
I think that sustainability strategies, like when we're developing them, they're quite universal. And whether we're working with a manufacturer or a local authority, or schools, or a large banking institution, the impact areas, like as you mentioned earlier, like Paul, the impact areas around sustainability do tend to be the same, and the impact areas around building management tend to be the same. But the current drivers, I would say, like as long as sustainability tells the story around a business case on this is going to save you money and also improve your reputation and help with your marketing, for example. So that kind of like that story. What's the sales piece in it? I think that's what really pushes sustainability forward. So the current agenda is definitely around reducing costs because of we keep saying there's an energy crisis in Europe due to, again, political issues.
Yeah.
Um, but we've been saying that, I think, for like 2 years. So I don't know what the term is now that we can refer to it. So there's an energy thing going on, which is a challenge. And it is definitely driving up costs. And so from our perspective, from a sustainability perspective, this is really exciting because it means that we can then push through things like energy optimization services because the business case is going to hopefully speak for itself. We can also push for our clients, for example, to again consider things like self-generation, so installation of PV, solar carports, all of these types of things, wind, so things that were not viable in the past due to the cost of energy are probably going to become more viable. So yeah, it just depends on what's the current story around cost saving. When we were talking about circular economy, we were looking into the business case for it is that you will reduce costs on resource use and consumption, for example. So it was looking into what's the benefit in that sense. And I think now it's again the story for the next, definitely for the next 12 months or so is going to be around what can we do to reduce energy costs for our clients in their buildings, and that will be the business case for a lot of things.
It's one that enough everybody seems to keep thinking and waiting for energy costs to reduce and go down. And I always remember somebody many years back saying to me, "You look at the history of energy costs, there's only one answer, and they go up." They always have done. They probably always will do. And if you think about that, even if the price of oil comes down, you end up with people at an expectation. So there's an opportunity that you then see other costs appear in it. So the overall cost ends up just continuing to stay at where it was and grow. But I do think that allows you, and what we're trying to do is that reduction of carbon and impact on the planet and the sustainability piece to get people to do it for a different reason, because it might not be that the carbon piece is top of their agenda today, but the cost piece might be. And if you can allow the cost piece to get you the result on the carbon, then everybody's winning. You're ticking those two boxes. Well, and on that, I mean, I'm going to say operational blind spot, but what you see across these portfolios, what's the one challenge that you wish that technology could really help you solve?
Challenge. Data. Definitely. Access
Data.
to data. Yeah. Um, and we know that there is technology out there
Mm,
around data. But yeah, my team and I, we spend a lot of time analyzing data. Um, and every sustainability department, we need a data analyst. A lot of us wear multiple hats, but one of the hats that most of us wear is being data nerds.
yeah.
So yeah, resolving like data, I think would be fantastic. Like if I could click my fingers and have access to all the data I need for a building, you can imagine like how easy it would be to create like priority plans for clients on their estate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I imagine the customer would probably say the same because when that
Mm.
request comes for all these data sets and they go looking at it going, I know the first one, but I don't know the second and third one. It's a whole load of work to go and find it. Yeah, the data side is definitely, and that gives you a guidance, doesn't it? It keeps you true. So it's so easy to go off and do things that you think are right, might not be right, depending on data. So I suppose your career's really, you've gone from different parts of your career, you built upon what you did previously. And this space needs a lot of resilience. It needs a lot of, every day's got a different challenge. And from your time as on your career, is there a peer or a mentor or somebody in that space that really influenced how you go about doing this and give us a bit of insight into who's shaped your thinking over the years?
Oh, Paul, I would say that it hasn't been a single person. I would say that I've met so many fantastic people who've been like truly like inspiring. And I think feel like very privileged to have worked in organizations where there was a lot of talent that, we could learn from. So I've been yeah, so definitely I've been very lucky in that sense. And those people know who they are because I reach out to them and I'm still in touch with them. And that's
Yeah,
one of the beauties I think of our industry, like working within facilities management and within our niche as well, is a lot of the people I've worked with are they're in my network.
yeah,
They are my friends. So work people. I always had this motto that going to work has to be fun. It shouldn't be painful because we spend a lot of time at work.
yeah,
Um, and you don't get to choose your family, but you can choose your work family. So
yeah,
choose wisely when you want to be
yeah,
with people. So yeah, that's one of the things. I mean, I haven't when I've applied for roles or been put forward for roles as well. That's always been one of the things that I've always said that it's down to my feeling and engagement with the people that I will be working with, opposed to the organization and what they're achieving. And I think some people that work in sustainability may feel, or when you're young and starting out in sustainability, you may feel, oh, I want to work for an organization that is really, making a big difference already on sustainability, that has an established team and a program. That wasn't important to me. For me, it was working for an organization that had good people that were willing to change, and I felt that I could engage with them. Because if we can get that chemistry right, then
yeah,
we can change anything, right? So you can
yeah.
deliver whatever sustainability program you want. Um, so yeah, I would say, yeah, I don't know if I can name people, Paul, but I would say that the people know who they are. And one of them is actually still my mentor even today. And I haven't
Yeah,
worked with
okay.
them for like maybe 7 years, but we still do
Yeah,
have like an annual catch up and a coffee and check in with each other
yeah.
and see how we are. And then one of the other people would definitely be like my dad, who I think was a
Okay.
big role model
Yeah,
for me as a child, to see, the projects that he'd worked on, being in engineering and a safety specialist in, ironically, the oil and gas field. But he
Okay.
introduced me to environmental management when I was young, and I
Wow.
learned that, oh, this is a potential career that environmental people could work in. And the irony was that it was in the oil and gas field.
Yeah. Yeah. It's but I suppose that near enough the exposure though those individuals working in those fields over the years probably had more exposure of what the other side of the coin was as well as the space they were working in. And is there you were said there that for people coming into it, you be surrounding yourself with people you can learn from. Would you say that's probably coming into this field? Would you say that's the most important thing, or is there a skill or a specific that you say if you're about to start your journey now, this is the one thing I would say make sure you've got in place?
So yeah, so if you're starting your journey, definitely like, yeah, when you're going to an organization, obviously read up on their sustainability reporting, etc. But I wouldn't say that that's the be all and end all. I know that with some of the young people that I've mentored and worked with, they would make statements around, I want to work for this organization because they're good on sustainability. And I would challenge that and say, but then what will you add to the team if they already got everything on sustainability? And so our role is to be an influencer, to be that annoying person in the office that instigates change and
Yeah.
has those weird conversations with leadership around the coffee machine to try and like move them into a direction that they may not really want to go. So I feel that, yeah, it's about having that, that mindset that you're going to come into an organization and that you will want to make changes, but also finding your allies in the organization. So if, for example, your line manager would be supportive of you, and they've got skills that you could definitely learn from, I think that that's important. um, yeah, it's a challenge as well, Paul, because I do feel with young people coming into sustainability, sometimes they would benefit from being in a team with a range of different skill sets so that you can actually learn from, the circular economy expert, learn from the biodiversity or ecologist, learn from the energy optimization experts or the bureau management experts, for example, or the data analyst. So going into a team where you may not be the specialist of these things but have the ability to learn from the people around you, I think is great. And that may even shape your career going forward, because sustainability is a huge area. We also have like social value as well, that's really grown in the last like decade or so
Yeah.
too. And there's a range of different skills in that area alone, which I feel is like, it has its right to be a standalone expertise now as well. It has its own institutions as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, that part about surround yourself with opportunities that you just described greatly there. That I think is so important, especially at the start of your career, because that opening up and seeing all the potential opportunities that you might go in slightly different directions, but learning from it. And I think that's really important. And I mean, you've always had a foot in education. Is there a way for our listeners today to tap into your expertise, whether that's through maybe mentorship or guest speaking, or just reaching out for advice or resources? How would they do that, and is that something they could do?
Yes. So just contact me on LinkedIn. Um,
LinkedIn.
Effectively, I do have people that I have supported, like, or given some advice, on their careers, and they are people I may have met through LinkedIn or through the guest lecturing um, that I do. But for young people, we also offer like work experience opportunities as well. And with the
Okay,
university,
very
we
good.
do mentor like MSc research projects. So I actually every year give a list of potential topics to the university,
All right.
and then yeah, so there's always something going on. But yeah,
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, Atiya, thank you very much for taking the time with us today. You've shown us today that sustainability isn't just a department, it's an operating system for the future of FM. I mean, from the lecture halls of Kingston to global boardrooms at Macro, your journey proves that data without human strategy is just noise. And to our listeners, if you're still treating green as a checkbox, you're probably already behind. So I'd recommend follow Atiya Khan to see how it's done at scale. Atiya, it's been fantastic. Thank you for joining us, and I look forward to catching up soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you.